between living and dying. And that's what we're planning for. By appropriately planning through the use of powers of attorney and most forms, you can actually express your preference about healthcare decisions when you have the ability to do so, while you still have the ability to do so. Some people feel like it's giving up control. It's actually keeping control of the things that are important to you and the choices that are important to you. So with that being said, I'm going to try and work some technological wizardry, which after a year of COVID, I should be more confident with, but I will do my best. All right, so I believe at this point you guys can see my slides. Thumbs up if you can see my slides. All right, woohoo. All right, so let me, all right, okay. So, just a few slides. I'm one of these guys. I like to use visuals. It's easier than just hearing me blabber on without anything to keep your eyes on. So, and I do practice in Maryland and DC, and the laws are by and large the same in Maryland and DC, but they differ slightly. And so today I'm going to focus primarily on DC procedures, but if you have any questions specific to Maryland, or obviously any questions at all, just put them in the chat box or shout out, and I'm happy to answer as best I can. So, first thing first, a healthcare power of attorney, also known as an advanced directive. What is this document? I have a kind of a picture of a sample one that we have prepared for folks. Obviously, names and contact information is redacted. But what is this document in a nutshell? In a nutshell, this document appoints an individual to make healthcare decisions for you if there comes a point where you can't make those decisions for yourself, either because you lack the ability to meaningfully communicate those decisions, or you have cognitive impairment that is impairing your ability to understand and meaningfully make those decisions. So it's critically important. This is kind of the first step in making sure that that if you become incapacitated, you have somebody in place who the doctors can communicate with to listen and to make choices for you. Now, when should I sign this document? Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of having, everybody should have one. One of the things that drives me crazy is when I work with people for estate planning, they say, I don't have an estate to plan for. And I say, well, yes, you do, because just being alive means, you should have an advanced directive, you should have a power of attorney. But really where I'm getting to with this is you need to make sure you sign a document like this before it's too late, because there can come a point where you no longer have the sufficient mental capacity to sign a document like this. Essentially, the standard is, you need to know what it is that you're signing in terms of the rights that you're giving up, the relationship to the people who you're nominating, and the meaning of the document. Of course, there can come a time where it's too late to understand those things. And when it's too late to understand those things, it's too late to sign this document. You're probably not going to have sufficient mental capacity to sign a valid advanced directive. Now, what sorts of decisions might your healthcare agent make? Well, really, it can be anything relating to your healthcare. It can be everything from surgical intervention. It can relate to placement and rehabilitation decisions. Really just kind of the broadest scope of healthcare decisions, anything that you yourself would talk to a doctor about. Mm-hmm. That's what your healthcare agent could speak to a doctor about. It also, an advanced directive also typically contains a HIPAA release for your healthcare agent. Simply put, if your healthcare agent is making decisions for you, we want to make sure that they have access to information so they can meaningfully make those decisions. Now, common question is, who should I appoint? Can I have co-agents? Should I have co-agents? Well, you can see actually on the form that I've used, if you can make it out, for this particular client, This client went with a spouse, with a backup agent as a son, and then a further backup agent as a son. So this particular client chose not to use co-agents. So, simply put, a lot of times people feel strongly, I have more than one child, I want to include them all in my document. And the question becomes, are you certain that it's a good idea? Because when push comes to shove, the doctors and medical professionals are going to want one person. They're going to be seeking the consent and instruction from one person. And if you appoint co-agents and one says go east and one says go west, you might as well not even have a document itself, because the doctors are it's essentially, and you don't have an agent who's able to meaningfully give consent on your behalf at that point. So, honestly, I commonly advise against using co-agents with the understanding that, more likely than not, your family is going to talk to one another, but it's kind of like the game of Family Feud, the old Richard Dawson show where there's a steal and every single member of the family can kind of shout out their opinion. But Richard Dawson went to the captain and said, what's the family's answer? Well, that's kind of this situation in a nutshell. You need somebody to speak for you. I have included language that expresses a strong preference for siblings and children to communicate with each other. What if I don't have one? Well, if you don't have one, if clients don't have one, for healthcare decision making, there are healthcare surrogacy laws in place that kind of have default decision makers. But honestly, the decisions that can be made are not as broad as the decisions which can be included in an advanced directive. So, if there are decisions that need to be made that don't fall within healthcare surrogacy laws, your family could be forced to go to the probate division in DC Superior Court and have essentially DC's version of a guardianship appointed open for you, which is really kind of the last place anybody wants to go or wants their family to go. So, healthcare power of attorney in a nutshell. I'm just looking. Okay, I was just looking at the chat and I was just looking for questions. So, next document is the DC most form. Now, the most form has some significant differences between an advanced directive. I see another. Let's see here. There's a question. What about having a backup POA, not a co-POA? So let me actually see if I can go back to my last slide. So if you look at this document, that's exactly what this particular client did. There are backup powers of attorney. In fact, there's a secondary backup power of attorney. We have spouse. I like to say it's kind of like line of succession to the throne. We have spouse, then we have son one, then we have son two. So, and I tell folks, and really, when I prepare any power of attorney, I am almost always, truly almost always, 99% of the time, putting at least one backup agent in, because you never know. I mean, for this particular client, this client and the client's spouse could both be in an auto accident. And so at that point, you need a backup. So to answer the question, always recommend having backup agents in a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney, which I'll get to just in a few moments. Hope that answered the question. All right, so DC's most form. Well, a little bit different than an advanced directive. Advanced directive can be obviously completed with an attorney. Most form, medical orders for scope of treatment, it's really, end of life decision making, and it must be completed with a medical professional, not something for a lawyer to complete, but something for you to complete, for a patient to complete in consultation with a medical professional. Now, that being said, if you have an advanced directive in place and you have a healthcare agent appointed and you no longer have the capacity yourself to complete the most form, your healthcare agent can complete a most form for you. So again, very important for your healthcare agent to know what your objectives are about end-of-life care. Familiarize yourself with the most form and the decisions on there, and the most form is available online. DC doesn't make it hard to find, and have that discussion with your healthcare agent to let them know what your choices are, so that when the time comes, it will make them feel more comfortable and confident. It's a really uncomfortable position for folks to be in. And I think they'll have more confidence knowing that they're doing what you would have wanted them to do if you have this discussion. It's an awkward discussion, but there are ways to make it not so awkward. Wine is a good way for that to be involved. Finally, know that it is a binding document on healthcare professionals. It's something that they, I have had clients who say, oh, why should I do one of these? Are they really going to listen? Well, a most form is binding on healthcare professionals, so it is important to have this if you feel strongly about end of life decisions. And interventions to extend your life in an end-of-life situation. Finally, I'm going to touch on something that's it's tangentially healthcare related, but it's a little bit afield, but it does relate to your healthcare decisions. And that's what happens if you're incapacitated and you need somebody to pay your bills, to pay your healthcare bills. Well, that is actually accomplished through a financial power of attorney. And I've got a sample form here. And actually on this one, you can see that this particular client chose, was unmarried, chose a trusted friend as the client's initial agent, chose a brother as a backup, and then a niece as a secondary backup. So it just goes to show between this and the other one that, that you can, there's a whole range of folks who you can select, whomever you feel most comfortable for can serve. And it does not have to be somebody who's blood related to you. Now, what is this document? Again, it is, I guess the best way of saying it is the document that, the healthcare power of attorney authorizes somebody to talk to the doctor. The financial power of attorney authorizes somebody to pay the doctor or pay for your care. This document authorizes your financial agent to access your financial resources and engage in financial transactions on your behalf. A lot of folks actually feel kind of scared about having this document because they say, well, goodness gracious, I mean, they have access to my finances. And the answer is, yes, they do. But, the thing to rest assured about is just because somebody has access doesn't mean that every single thing that they do is automatically blessed. And a financial agent can still be liable civilly and criminally for misuse of a financial power of attorney. What sorts of financial transactions might an agent engage in regarding your health care? Two biggies. One would be accessing your resources to pay for your care. Another very important one is actually applying for governmental assistance on your behalf. It's actually the financial power of attorney that vests somebody with the authority to apply and receive and take custody of governmental financial assistance on your behalf. So obviously that's something that can really tie into your healthcare decision making and your healthcare needs. Who should I appoint? Co-agents? Should I have co-agents? Kind of the same rule of thumb about having co-agents. I'm not such a big fan of them, but for this one, I would say, when I talk to clients about who they should appoint, it is, you can see in this one that this particular client chose a friend over blood relatives. Lots of reasons, obviously, that I can't go into for attorney-client privilege, but all I can say is, there are considerations when you're choosing somebody for your finances. It's got to be somebody who you unquestionably know that once they have access to your finances will make good and sound decisions with respect to your money. Does not have to be the same person as your healthcare power of attorney. I get asked that a lot. You can absolutely bifurcate those roles. Now, what if I don't have one? Well, unlike healthcare, where there are kind of default laws for healthcare surrogacy that can kind of provide some level of backstop if you don't have an advanced directive, no such thing for your finances. If you don't have a financial power of attorney and you become incapacitated and somebody needs to reach your resources to pay for your care, that would involve somebody going to DC Superior Court and having a conservatorship opened to access your resources. So this is actually, I think, because it ties into healthcare, even though it's a financial power of attorney, it's important to keep in mind with respect to your healthcare decision making. So I'm going to, with that, the last slide, email me anytime. And I see I've got some questions in the chat. Let me just open that up. All right. Anybody able to read the sample forms? So I apologize for that. I mean, I save them as graphics and just put them into the slides. I can email out samples. I just need to make sure that I redact, obviously, client information from them. I had just taken the first page of some ones, and I can email them out. Question is, what does a DC most form do that a healthcare advanced directive does not? A DC most form is geared specifically to end of life care. It's really end of life intervention, whereas an advanced directive is much broader. An advanced directive focuses on kind of, it's anything. It's, you're under anesthesia and there's, an additional type of surgical treatment that needs to be done. You've had a stroke, you're temporarily incapacitated, and a rehabilitation decision needs to be made. So that's kind of, falls within the umbrella of an advanced directive that does not fall within the umbrella of a most form. And medical and financial power of attorney can be done without a lawyer. Well, I appreciate that, Samantha. So as an initial point, I would 100% agree. I am a big believer in making powers of attorney accessible to everybody, and with or without a lawyer. And in fact, Maryland has their forms available online, which is great. When I give this presentation to folks in Maryland, I actually include a link so that people can just go and get the forms. I'm a big believer in this sort of thing. I've had loved ones who have needed these documents, and I look at these types of presentations as a way to just educate. What lawyers can do with respect to powers of attorney. I think we can advise a lot of times. What I find we're doing more than anything with respect to power of attorney is maybe explaining the form a little bit more, but I'd say more than anything, talking things through with people in terms of who the most appropriate person is to serve, because a lot of people struggle with that. And so we talk that through. We also talk through kind of, if clients have trusts at play, or other existing estate planning documents that talk about the disposition of their wealth and their assets during their life. That's something that we're commonly involved in terms of kind of if there is, in fact, a necessary interplay between a financial power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney and a will or a trust that we're also working on. That's where we're having I think a very important discussion about taking a look holistically at the powers of attorney in light of the entire plan. But that being said, I am a big believer. I volunteer actually at some seminars in Montgomery County where literally they're power of attorney seminars at senior centers where we just we help people do them, and only powers of attorney, because I think they're important, and I want folks to understand them so that they can do them without a lawyer. If you know, for whatever reason, a lawyer is inaccessible. So, any other questions? I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm going to stop my screen share. Let's see here. All right. Oh, two other questions. All right. Once an individual completes the advanced directive, do they need to provide copies to their physician? Who else should receive a copy? All right. So, with respect to an advanced directive, and this kind of differs between healthcare and financial powers of attorney. So, you know, start with the proposition. And I just had this conversation actually yesterday afternoon with clients who are signing these. Start with the proposition that these documents can be changed during your life so long as you have capacity. So, you know, it's entirely possible that the document that you're signing right now is not going to be a document or an appointment that's in place 10 or 15 years from down the road. Now, it's entirely possible that it is, but it's important to approach it, I think, with that mindset that it might not be when you're making that decision. So first of all, with respect to an advanced directive, this should be something I do recommend that this is in your medical files, in your, you know, with your treating physician. Very, very, very important. So I do recommend to folks, that's kind of the exception to the rule. People say, should I give copies of my power of attorney to people? And I say, generally not, except your advanced directive. I'm a big believer in that going into your primary care physician's records. So advanced directive I talked about. Financial power of attorney, a little bit different story. I'm not as big a believer in giving that form out. Just because of the power, and I would say the potential for misdeeds with that document. I think that it's important to let people know if they're nominated, that they are in fact nominated, and where they can find the document. And that the document not be kept in a safe deposit box, that it be kept somewhere that's accessible in the event of an emergency. But I generally don't recommend giving a copy of a financial power of attorney out. I would imagine each question in the forms could involve a lot of decision-making. Each question would involve a lot of ethical, legal decision-making and recommendations for good, in-depth discussions. You know, this is where things get difficult, because I like to say, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a priest. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not a member of the clergy. All I can do is really advise about, you know, this is the document. This is the legal impact of the document, the effects of the document, the rights and obligations of somebody you name. So, you know, I mean, the kinds of discussions about ethical and moral decision making, I honestly tell folks that that's something that's not necessarily as appropriate for a discussion with me. I'm happy to have it. I've had discussions with people about family dynamics and things of that nature, just in terms of the strategizing about, should I have co-agents or not? What order of succession should I put my children in? But, you know, anytime people talk about, you know, ethical and moral dilemmas, that's kind of one of those things where I don't feel as comfortable, and I say, you know, that's something where, you know, you talk to somebody who might have a closer link to the person upstairs.
And I think that question and Mr. Schaefer's last question about the 5 wishes document's a good segue into.
I'm so glad you jumped in, because I saw that question about the 5 wishes, and I was going to use that as a springboard into you. There's one last question. I trust my sister and backup brother who are MDs, and I'm concerned about voiding their judgment with a most document. Yeah, I mean, so bear in mind that, you know, because a most document is binding, if you don't have a most document, I probably should have mentioned this. If you don't have a most document, but you have an advanced directive, basically the decisions that would otherwise be yours to make in the most document belong to your healthcare agent. So if you trust, under the situation where you've described, where you have doctors in the family, I mean, that's great. Like, I love when I have clients who have, like, I have a daughter who's a nurse. Awesome. Like, that's great. You know, and so to that point, I think it's a valid one, that might be a situation where you don't necessarily want to use the most form. You might want to rely upon, you know, the specialized skill that you're fortunate enough to have a power of attorney who has, to make those informed decisions at that time. So
Right.
my thought on that. Tony, Marianne, off to you guys.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, so I will go ahead and read Mary Ann's intro before she presents. So our next presenter is going to be Mary Ann Buckley, the Executive Director of Care Management at Corwood Care. Mary Ann Buckley, LCSWC, CASWCM, graduated from Ohio University with a bachelor's degree in social work and worked at a nursing home and for the County Child Protective Services Board until moving to the DC metro area. She returned to the workforce once her youngest child was in kindergarten as a social worker on the geriatric unit at Georgetown Hospital. She was a member of the ethics consult team at the hospital. At age 38, Mary Ann left the workforce to gain her master's degree in social work at the University of Maryland in Baltimore. Mary Ann has continued her passion for enriching older adults' lives in her career at the Hebrew Home, Seabury Care Management, and Adventist Rehabilitation Hospital of Maryland. Mary Ann has worked with older adults and their family members directly and in an administrative capacity. She has led community Alzheimer's support groups and hospital-based stroke support group. She has also provided presentations to senior groups, churches, and social workers on aging-related issues. Mary Ann joined Corwood Care Management in May 2019 as the Executive Director of Care Management. She is excited to work with the dedicated team of nurses, social workers, and paraprofessionals at Carewood. Mary Ann has 3 adult children and 4 grandchildren. She is the proud daughter of an active 88-year-old mother who has taught her the value of staying active and engaged in life.
Thank you. And that's way too long of a bio. I'm sorry that you got all of that information.
Okay.
I'm actually the proud daughter of a 91-year-old mother. And I'm now the proud grandmother of 5. So that was written a couple years ago. Sorry, it was so lengthy. I don't know about you, but I've done these before with Jeremy, and I've spoken with Jeremy in a professional manner. And I always learn something from what he has to say. And I think in my 30 plus years of doing social work with older adults, I've kind of seen these, and I'm going to ask Jeremy to pipe in when he wants to say something, because it's so important, that I've seen the power of attorney documents where, let's say a mother, myself, has 3 children, and sometimes we feel the need as parents to put all 3 down, you know, and share that power of attorney, wherein we really have to look at our adult children, if that's who we're going to name, and see their skills and see who would be best doing that. One example I had years ago when my children were little, if I said, okay, we're going out to dinner tonight, where do you want to go? All 3 picked a different restaurant. You know, they themselves can't make decisions. So I think it's so important to look at your adult children, your nieces, your nephews, whoever's in your life, your friend, your best girlfriend, your former coworker that you still stay in touch with, a neighbor that you've grown so close with, whoever that is, just make sure, number one, you trust them, right? And that they're able to handle what this responsibility is. And I think the only way you can do that is through talking with them, and for them to really learn what your wishes are, because it's not for them to make the decision what they think you should want. It's for them to say, if you could speak, or if you didn't have dementia, what would you want? So I think we'll go into my brief little PowerPoint presentation, which hopefully Tony's going to do for you, because I haven't learned anything with Zoom, Jeremy. It's all, it's all Tony. Tony. Okay, thank you for that slide. Next, do I have to do this, Tony, or can you?
Sorry, I was muted. No, I'll drive for you.
Okay, but I can't see all of it because of the pictures, the faces on the side. Can you somehow put them on the top?
If
Or
you
move that over?
if you click view in the upper right-hand corner,
I'm so sorry, everybody. Yes,
and which one is checked off?
I don't see anybody that's checked off.
Do you see speaker view, gallery view?
I think your presentation should probably be showing, but maybe, Marianne, you could drag and drop the photos to the bottom or top, if that'd be better. Because I think you're probably seeing the slideshow large, right?
I am. So do I hide the video panel? Okay, I'll just do that. Okay, sorry. Thanks, Amy. I have a whole tech support here. So I can't see any of you, but maybe Tony or Amy will let me know if there's any questions, and Jeremy's invited to join in with a good story. So the healthcare decisions, it's really something where you share your wishes with others, like we talked about the doctors, right? As well as your family member, friends, power of attorney. This is a great way for others to learn about your wishes before a crisis. It's up to you. I think the best advice I have is for you to learn and understand your medical history and your conditions. So having that discussion with the doctor about the possibility of maybe someday you might have to go on dialysis. You might want to know that if you've got a kidney issue or diabetes now, is there a possibility that you might go on dialysis? Because you'll want to talk with your doctor about that. For me, I think when we're able to make these decisions and put this on paper and we've really thought it over, it's very empowering. I'm planning for my future. I'm planning for when I can't make decisions and what do I really want. And I want you to think of it as because as a care manager, I work with older adults and their adult children or nieces or nephews or whoever's in their life. It's really a gift for those who care for you, because in a crisis moment, to be able to make a decision quickly is pretty tough. But as I am my 91-year-old mother's medical power of attorney, I know exactly what she wants. We've talked over the document. I've looked it over. We've had multiple conversations. And in my situation, I'll just share this. I have two sisters back in Ohio that live very close to my mom. They're wonderful. They will do her grocery shopping. However, when she needs to go to the hospital or she's had a trip or two to the ER, the two of them go together and just about pass out because they're not comfortable in hospitals. So no hard feelings. My mom chose me to be her medical power of attorney. I've worked in hospitals. I'm happy to talk about medical issues, just to give you an idea when you think about who you want to appoint. And it really is, as Jeremy says, this is your guide for your medical care. Okay. I just wanted to give you some statistics. I don't know. I really, statistics, if I can say it correctly, really helps focus me. So there's been a study, this is a little bit old, but 80% of older adults wish to die at their home, in their home. That makes sense to me. However, 60% of older adults actually die in hospitals. 20% of older adults die in nursing homes. So really, actually, only 20% of older adults die at home. Now, this could be a whole nother PowerPoint presentation, but sometimes I think it is due to, in the realm of what we're talking about right now, today, it's that maybe people weren't making their wishes known. I don't want to die in the hospital. So thank you, Tony, for switching already to the 5 wishes. This is a document, and I know this was one of the questions asked. This was created locally by Jim Towey, an attorney who worked with Mother Teresa at a hospital for those with AIDS in DC. And for the life of me, I can't remember that hospice. But when I worked at Georgetown Hospital in the early 90s, I know we discharged patients there. And he's a part of a company or an agency called Aging with Dignity, a national nonprofit. This allows you to document what matters most to you through the end of life. This is something you'll want to give copies to your doctor, take to the hospital, give to family members, just like the other things. You need to tell trusted people where it's located. Thank you for Jeremy for mentioning not to put it in your safe deposit box. And really helps you have the conversation. Jeremy and I were talking, I think, several months ago, and I shared with him that 2 of our clients last year were, 2 of the clients that we had last year were both gentlemen in their early to mid 90s, both retired attorneys, and neither had done their estate planning. Why was that? They hadn't gotten around to it. They just didn't do it. So please do those documents early, and please have conversations with other people. I learned this, a unique way about that is years ago when the Advanced Directive paperwork was coming out. My mother and father-in-law live in Ohio, and I was asking my father-in-law, and he says, well, Mom, meaning his wife, she'll know what I want. And I'm like, well, Dad, did you talk to her about it? We've been married X amount of years. She knows what I want. I'm like, no, have you talked to her about it? So just because you've been married and you sleep in the same bed at night and you eat dinner together and all those other things doesn't mean that you really know. So this is something we have to have conversations about. And as Jeremy mentioned, you may change your mind. And I think that we're seeing a lot of people moving from having the actual funeral and burial to cremation. That's something I've been noticing in the past several years. So, and you can make those changes. Jeremy might want to pipe in about how you have to void the healthcare power of attorney.
Sure. So yes. I would just simply put, so, you know, I recommend, as far as, you know, I mean, there's really not unlike a will, which actually there are requirements that it actually be physically destroyed to affirmatively revoke a prior version of a will. A power of attorney, you essentially look at the most recent form. What's the most recent one that was signed? Now, that being said, the danger in having lots of different copies out there is that if you do create a new one, but somebody has an older one, how is somebody going to know that you actually created a newer one? So, you know, my recommendation to folks is, you know, if you do have new documents, particularly substituting people, to send a letter letting them know that, you know, and you don't have to include a new document, but that your prior power of attorney has been revoked. Thank you you very much for your service. Just so you know, the healthcare power of attorney or advanced directive or financial power of attorney dated such and such has now been revoked. Please destroy that, or please return any copies to me. Thank you very much. And that's, you know, I mean, that's kind of the best thing that you can do. And of course, within your possession, we do recommend that, you know, that you destroy, or if you don't want to destroy, but you want to keep a record of it, to put big, giant X's on each page. And then on the front page, right, revoked with the date.
Okay. Jeremy, there was and I'm not good with chat, but there was just a really great question in the chat box. Can you pull that up and answer that one?
Yeah, so the question is, I've been advised not to have a lawyer-written advance directive and a 5 wishes, which is also a legal document, and the preference is for the lawyer-written one. Well, so actually, it's interesting you asked that, Richard. So we provide folks with the 5 wishes document, because the thing to keep in mind is the 5 wishes document, it is a document that it expresses wishes, but it actually is not legally binding. And we have told folks that. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, that it is your opportunity to make decisions, to express your preferences, but it's not a legally binding document. So to that end, there's not really conflict between an advanced directive and a 5 wishes. We tell folks the interplay between them is that the 5 wishes can inform and should be used to inform and advise the decisions that ultimately a healthcare agent makes for you. As Mary Ann said, it's kind of your opportunity to have a conversation, part of a conversation with the person who you trust to make these decisions. But it is not legally binding, and generally speaking, it does not trump the decisions of somebody who's nominated under an advanced directive to make them. Also know that a most form does, completed with a physician, does trump a 5 wishes. 5 wishes, it is your wish. It is an expression of your desires, of your intent, of your values. Important, very important to have. But there's not necessarily going to be conflict between that and one of the other documents.
Mm-hmm. And I think you could also see the 5 wishes is just a step-by-step as you go through that document and fill it out. I think it's going to help not only you think of things that maybe you've not thought about. And then, as Jeremy said, yes, this is a document by all means to share with your family member as part of a discussion, to start a discussion, to continue a discussion, to kind of share, hey, I want you to see what I've written. And from that booklet, the 5 wishes, you can have those discussions, why you want this or what's most important for you. I know when I've gone through it, it's really helped me focus on what's really important at end of life. So I'll kind of go through the wish one is who can make decisions for me, and kind of that we've already talked about. Someone you trust, yes. Someone who's available, comfortable with asking questions of medical staff, you've had a conversation with, and will honor your wishes. That's what we talked about. Wish 2 is the treatment I want and I don't want. Yes. And that's where we talked about earlier, make sure you're educated on that, what you're, have that discussion with your doctor, I've got these symptoms, what should I be mindful of or be concerned in the future? So it's really focusing on what you want in terms of treatment and what you don't want. Okay. Then wish 3, wishes for my comfort. And I think this is really great to read. What medications do I want? What medications don't I want? What type of care I want? What type of treatment that I want? You could talk in there about, whether you want hospice care or not, what's important to you. Wish 4 is how I want people to treat me. I want people to be with me at end of life, or I want to be alone. Here's where you could say, I want to die at home. And as you've done this document, you're conveying that, right, and talking to family members or whoever's your power of attorney, letting them know what's really important to you. You want people to pray for you. You want to have a clergy visit, or you don't. I would want to know these things if for my family member. What do I want my loved ones to know? This is the 5th wish, and I think it just gives you so many options to fill out, right? And as Jeremy said, it's not legally binding, but I think it helps with the conversation. Letting people know that you don't fear death, if that's the truth. You want them to know you forgive them for whatever. I want loved ones to make peace with each other. I think this is a good one when you might have those, you've got 2 children and they've never gotten along and they still don't get along. And you can put that in there that is your wish. right? That you hope that they make peace with each other. What you want your healthcare providers to know about you. I think that's very helpful. You know, some people are very, don't do well with pain, and has always struggled with that, or I don't know, but really what you want your healthcare providers to know about you. You can even put in there how you want to be remembered, and you can add whether you want a burial or a cremation. So that's, I think, a really important document, or, you know, paper to do. I think it's important for you, and I think it's important for other people. And Tony's going to share a blank copy of the 5 Wishes booklet for everyone who's joined. And so that's kind of my run through about the 5 wishes and having that conversation. I think oftentimes, and Jeremy, you might see this as well, people who feel like they don't have anyone in their life that they can ask to do this. And certainly you have to have that good conversation with the person. And the best way to help them to help you is to do these documents so they know exactly what you want and they can be your voice during that time period. Any thoughts on that when older adults don't have anybody in their life?
Yeah, Marianne. So I absolutely. And then there's a question in the chat that I'll get to in a moment.
Okay.
So it is difficult. And I find particularly it's for particularly difficult either for, you know, unmarried individuals who, you know, either, you know, widowed or never married. Because, you know, the obvious choice for many of us is, well, I want my spouse to be my agent. Well, you know, what if you don't have a spouse, your spouse can't serve? And what if you have a small family or no family at all? Or no family that's close? I mean, in this area, actually, we do a lot of work with people who have, you know, their entire families abroad. And it is very difficult. And I have talked to folks who really struggle with this. And so we start with the proposition of how important and essential it is to have these documents. It is, you know, I think that it is, you know, that the, you know, the uncomfortable discussion of asking somebody to serve is worth the value that these documents can offer. And, you know, I have recommended to people kind of the old, you know, reciprocal relationship. You know, if I'm there for you, will you be there for me? You know, choose a trusted friend. In fact, the financial power of attorney that I used, where there was a trusted friend who was the first agent, that was actually that kind of situation where it was, you know, it was I can share. It was a widowed female client. And she just, you know, I mean, her family wasn't close by, and she, you know, had developed a very close friendship with a few people who lived in her building. And they, you know, they filled that void for each other. So I don't know if that answers your question, Marianne. It's tough, and it doesn't do away with the problem, and it is there for folks. It is something that's difficult. You know, I will say I see somebody who, you know, who said in the chat that there are attorneys who are willing to be POAs. And yeah, I mean, there are attorneys who are out there. It's a personal decision for attorneys whether or not that, you know, they're comfortable taking on that role with respect to their clients. I will tell you, to be completely honest, for reasons that are lengthy and varied and that aren't, you know, I won't go, but we that's something that we choose not to do here. Simply put, we think it's important for there to be kind of lines that are in place so that the power of attorney, if the power of attorney has questions, they can call us to kind of give advice in terms of carrying out, what are my rights, what are my obligations. So, it is something that it's not something that we do, but Gloria, to your point, I know plenty of attorneys who do. And in fact, many of them, as far as charging to do so, many of them won't charge unless they're actually serving. And at that point, some of them will charge various fee structures, and that's obviously something that is an important conversation that they'll have with you if you want to appoint them. If I can, Marianne, just one other question about there's a question in the chat. Does a most document invalidate your healthcare power of attorney for end of life decisions? So they essentially work in tandem. So most is really, really focused on end of life, basically, a true end of life medical intervention. Now, does it invalidate a power of attorney? No, it doesn't. Do bear in mind that a healthcare agent does have the authority to supersede an existing most form. So if circumstances have changed and your values have changed and your healthcare power of attorney knows that, your healthcare power of attorney can actually complete a new most form. That's consistent with your current wishes. Again, it's all the more important why to share these wishes, to have these discussions. So I would say that a most form is there. It is binding. But it can be updated by somebody who's appointed as your healthcare power of attorney. They do have the authority to do that. I'm seeing. Do any forms in DC deal with a medical aid in dying issue? None that I'm aware of yet. Marianne, do you know anything about that?
There is an agency, and maybe Samantha or Brene know, in DC. I'll have to Google it, but there is something, but I don't know as if they're forms, but there's some. Do either of you know Compassionate, or I'll have to look it up. It's not top of mind, but I can look it up.
It's like Compassionate Conversations or something like that.
So I'll look for it and then send it to you.
Or the Conversation Project. Does that sound familiar?
No, it's not the Conversation Project. That was started out in Boulder, Colorado, just to, get people to start talking about these. Is it Compassionate Choices? It may be. I went to a presentation by the woman who's a part of that organization. Yeah. And I think if you really have no one in your life that you feel is up to the task and can do these, this is the issue that Diane Rehm is involved with. That's great. It's almost like that needs to be your homework, or that's where you need to put your focus if you don't have anyone, to really start looking at your people in your life who could do these things. You could reach out to a religious, if you're a member of a church or a synagogue or a mosque, just to see if anyone there would be willing to do this. I know this was several years ago. And there was, I worked near a church, and they were actually training people to do powers of attorney. Now that may have changed, I don't know. Always you could check in with legal counsel for the elderly, or you could check with the village, who is a support for all things under the sun, just to, check in with about that. I can't read the chats, but if anybody wants to.
I was going to mention one thing too that we often talk about with members. If they have someone who could help make decisions, or like make the final decision with support from either the village or a care manager or someone else, So if it's someone who lives in California and can't be on the grounds, maybe they can partner with someone local.
Thank you. As a care manager, that often can be our role for someone who just wants some assistance. If they are a power of attorney and they are going into the hospital or speaking with doctors or such a great example, we actually have a care manager on our team who's a retired physician. So certainly she's well versed in talking with family members about medical issues and in a situation. I talked with a gentleman yesterday who's power of attorney, and the person he's power of attorney for is just a longtime friend. And there's some, due to a health issues, there's some intricacies there with navigating the whole hospital, rehab, coming home, and help at home, and all those issues that someone might be faced with. And so he did turn to care management. And I just said, you know, we could be your guide. We're not going to replace, you know, your friend, your relationship, and your power of attorney, but we could help you to help that person in your life. Just to make you aware of services, talk with doctors and nurses, and make sure you know what options that are out there in terms of rehab, go home. If you go home, what type of care do you need? You know, all of those issues. Insurance, what's covered, what's not covered. Do you have long-term care insurance? Those are kind of things that a care manager can be your assistant, if you will, and help you through that process. You know, help you guide. But ultimately, it is your decision. We just will be a support to you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Did we get them all?
I think so. Yep, we're good.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing the morning with us.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, this is the end of our presentation. We thank everyone for joining.
And
Very much. It was very, very informative.
good.
Good. Have a great day.
Glad to hear it. And we will be sending out some PowerPoints from today and all of the information you received. So be on the lookout for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for including the other villages.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Of course, glad you're able to come.
and a link for that most form. Renee, yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you so
bye,
much.
Good
everyone.
to see everybody.
Great to see you.
Yes. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for Nate, too.
Thank you.